Welcome to the Bar Exam Toolbox podcast. Today we're celebrating our 200th podcast episode. Yay! Your Bar Exam Toolbox hosts are Allison Monahan and Lee Burgess. That's me. We're here to demystify the bar exam experience so you can study effectively, stay sane, and hopefully pass and move on with your life. We're the co-creators of the Law School Toolbox, the Bar Exam Toolbox, and the career-related website Career Dicta. Allison also runs the Girls Guide to Law School. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review on your favorite listening app and check out our sister podcast, the Law School Toolbox Podcast. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can reach us via the contact form on barexamtoolbox.com, and we'd love to hear from you. And with that, let's get started.
Welcome to this celebration of our 200th episode of the Bar Exam Toolbox podcast. It's very crazy that so many people have listened. We really appreciate it. It's had almost 750,000 downloads, which is incredible. So thank you for being a part of it. And today we're going to run down a list of our top 10 most popular episodes / episode types. All right, Lee. Well, what is number one?
Well, this is always fun, is to go into our statistics and find out what people are listening to. And I went to look for my top 10, and I found out that the top 20 plus episodes are all of the same type.
Oh, well, we're done.
I know.
Thanks for listening. Bye.
Exactly. Yes. So these are the listen and learn episodes, which I really love that these are so popular. I actually remember when we came up with the idea for these episodes, we were sitting and having coffee, some of our favorite things to do together. But if you aren't familiar with them, the idea is that we introduce an area of heavily tested law, and then we apply it to different fact patterns. And our idea is that these bite-sized chunks of law are really easy to follow when you're just taking a bite-sized chunk. And so we can tell you not only what the law is, but how you will likely see it applied on exam day. And of all of these very popular episodes, our two most popular episodes in Listen and Learn were on real property, which I don't think should surprise anyone, because who loves real property? Only real property attorneys, I think. I think nobody else.
I know. I have a feeling we probably struggled to get one of our tutors to even write those. So kudos to them for going ahead and getting it done.
Exactly. But I do get a lot of feedback that listeners do love these episodes because it's a way to kind of review law while you're driving in the car or on the treadmill or doing something that doesn't have to feel like studying necessarily, but you're still, getting exposure to heavily tested law. And, between us presenting the law and applying it, you are getting exposed to it multiple times in a 15-20 minute period.
Right. And we've even had occasionally people write into us saying, I really think you might be the actual reason I passed the bar exam because I got this question on a topic that I was totally unprepared for. And it happened to be on a topic that I listened to a Listen and Learn. And I could hear Lee walking me through the elements in my head on the exam. And I wrote down those elements and I applied the facts and I passed the bar.
It's so magical. I love it. It just warms my heart. So please send us notes if you have positive feedback, but also you can send us notes if there are any areas of the law that you've been struggling with. We take user questions and turn them into Listen and Learns. So stay tuned. If you have some questions, please share with us and we'll try and get you some examples of that law.
Yeah, maybe don't ask any con law ones right now, but
well, yeah, that's tricky. I mean, how are they even going to? Oh my! I know we actually had to table a couple Listen and Learn episodes because we feel like the law is really unstable right now. Anyway,
yeah. So anyway, ask us about torts or something that hopefully isn't changing.
Evidence, maybe. Okay, so that was like our top chunk of episodes. Then the next most popular episode was episode 181. Which is more on memorization in the bar exam. And I also don't think that this was shocking to me because most bar studiers that we talk to are very concerned with memorization. And I think this is something that the large bar review providers often just kind of leave up to the student. They don't really give you a ton of direction.
Yeah, so I think this is obviously like super critical. I mean, one of the key reasons people do not pass the bars is they just haven't memorized enough material. So this episode talks about, what's even realistic to memorize because it's not going to be, 300 pages of stuff probably word for word. We talk about different memorization techniques. We talk about how to practice the material that you've memorized. But I think really thinking through how am I going to memorize, starting way earlier than you're probably recommended to if you're doing a large course. There should not something that should be left to the very end. I think this is a really important episode, so I'm glad people are listening to it.
Yeah, me too. Our third episode on the list is tips for bringing up your MBE score, which also is not surprising to me because people are really worried about MBE scores. So we discussed reasons why people struggle with the MBE, how to tell where you're having difficulties with the test, getting the right tools for exam prep. There are some new ones out there, and learning the law you need for the exam and analyzing your past scores. Almost everyone we talk to about failing the bar exam has something to do with the MBE. I mean, it's a really tough part of the test. We don't see a lot of people who knock the MBE out of the park and are just brought down by their writing scores. I think most students either struggle with both, or the MBE can be a challenge and kind of pull people down.
Right. I mean, the reality is if you have a high enough MBE score, we're probably not going to see you talking to us about failing.
Well, that's true.
You're not going to fail. You could. I mean, that was my approach. I'm like, let me get a really high MBE score, and then I can totally bomb the essays and hope that the PT pulls me through.
But I still get so much feedback from folks that they are not doing enough questions. I had someone else talk to me this week and said, well, I did a lot of questions. I did 1,000.
Right.
And I'm like, that's not a lot of questions. It sounds like a lot of questions, but it's just not a lot of questions. That's not enough.
No, it's not enough. And I definitely hear that a lot. Like, I just don't know what I could possibly do on the MBE. Like, I've done so many questions. I did 1,500 questions. It's like, well, that is a lot of questions, but it's still not even actually kind of the minimum that we would suggest doing. So I think there are other things you could probably do, like listen to this episode.
I know. And also just this idea that you have to be evaluating how you're doing. And that's something we also talk about in this episode. But you've got to make sure that you understand what's happening when you're doing those questions, why you're getting them right, why you're getting them wrong, to make sure that you're studying the right way.
Right.
Because if you could have a knowledge of the law problem and not realize it because you're just dismissing getting questions wrong for other reasons.
Yeah, exactly. This is one of those, I mean, I think in a way it's easier to make up points typically on the MBE because it's a more focused area of the law. You've only got 7 topics. There's a limited universe that can be tested. If your memorization isn't the strongest, this is actually probably a better place for you to be.
Yeah.
But the reality is, a lot of people struggle with multiple choice. It is definitely a weird way of evaluating your knowledge of the law and your understanding of the law. But, if you're struggling, go check out 178, which is our tips for bringing up MBE scores.
All right. Next up, number 4 on the list was episode 136, outlining on the remote bar exam back in the COVID days.
Early COVID
days when people were taking the exam on computers from home. Who would have thought that would have happened, but it did. But I included it on this list because I still think there are some valuable lessons from this episode, especially about the pros and cons of outlining on the computer versus paper. And I think it can be tricky to make sure that the way that you're outlining is actually leading you to the best possible exam answer. Of course, you have to practice and evaluate as you are doing the abundance of practice I'm sure you're doing to get ready for the bar. But I thought we had some good discussions in this episode about how to take the exam on a computer and also the logistics of testing software, which I think is not going anywhere. I mean, I think we're just moving to probably eventually requiring it. Everybody's going to have to take these exams on the computer.
Yeah, I mean, I think the real trick with the COVID was that you had to also read and outline everything on the computer too.
Yeah.
But, that was definitely tricky for people. But a lot of people still do try to outline, on their laptop rather than a piece of paper. And we think that's a bad idea, but you can listen to this episode and probably find out why.
That's true. Number 5 on our list is a great title. Episode 142, The Worst Bar Exam Advice We've Ever Heard. That might be my favorite episode title for those 200 episodes. So this was fun because we really just got to go through all the crummy advice that we hear people share with us and that people gave us when we were studying. And I have to, raise that my favorite terrible advice is just do what the bar company tells you and you will pass.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. I hear that with people who talk to me about why they failed. And they're like, well, I just stuck with the program. And like, that didn't work for you, did it?
I know. It's so true. And, the other topics that we talk about, that some people think it's okay to study late into the night and just to push through exhaustion, which is also terrible. This is a marathon, not a sprint. Thinking that you can just wait to practice until you know the law. That's another favorite of ours.
Always a good one.
Always a good one. So there are many more, but this is a great episode to check out to see if you may have gotten some of this advice. And if you're following it, you may just want to listen to our discussion and evaluate some of your choices.
Yeah, I talked to someone the other day who was convinced that she failed because she was so exhausted going into the test. And I'm like, you know what? That might actually be accurate.
Yeah. I've talked to a lot of people this season who have been in that situation, who I'll kind of be like, if you speak to me about the test, I'll always say something like, was there anything else going on that you want to share with me? And then sometimes people will say like, oh, well, yes, I had a 3-month-old and and then my significant other had COVID. And then my other child and you're just like, oh, okay. So you were stressed and didn't have time to study. I get that, but I think a lot of times people really do kind of ignore these other factors that are totally lead to exhaustion and overwhelm, and you cannot perform at your best that way.
Right. And I just think you have to be realistic about the schedule. If somebody has you studying 12 hours a day, like 7 days a week for months on end, that's probably not A, necessary, and B, going to result in, you being well rested and like ready to go for this exam.
Yeah. All right. Number 6 on our list is episode 168, which is 10 things to think about if you are taking the July 2022 bar exam, which always proves that everyone loves a top 10 list. Always. Back from our blogging days.
Yeah.
Everybody loves a top 10 list.
It really is true. We're always like, can you put it in a top 10? Okay, great. Thanks.
I know. It's so true. But I think this episode and similar episodes are great because they really give you a checklist of all the things you need to think about if you're getting ready to sit for the exam. So in this episode, we talked about getting your bar application in order, evaluating your study options, starting to study early, signing up and taking the MPRE, which I think a lot of people forget about because I think it's not talked about as much as it probably should be.
Yeah.
And then thinking about accommodations and dealing with the ongoing pandemic realities. I was on a phone call earlier today when I was saying, it's not that COVID is over. COVID is, what do we even say now? I don't know. There are COVID realities that still have to be dealt with. I don't even know what to say anymore. Do you know the language we're supposed to be using now? These aren't COVID times. What are they anymore?
I don't know. COVID endemic times.
I guess. I don't know. Anyway, but there are still realities that come with that. Because if you get COVID, you probably won't be able to sit for the test. I mean, if you get COVID like right before the test, I don't think they're going to let you in.
Right. I mean, people are still getting it. We had law student the other day. It was like, oh, sorry, I've been out of touch. I was dealing with having COVID, and I talked to him like a couple of days before that happened.
So, virtually, thankfully. Yes.
Yes. Thank you. On the phone. Thank goodness. Yeah. I mean, there's some things that you always have to think about for the bar. And then there are other things that you've got to think about because we're still living in pretty weird times.
Yeah. I was kind of excited to see number 7 on the list, which was episode 139, employment concerns relating to the bar exam. Because I think this is something that so many people have to deal with.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, yeah. So I love that people are listening to this episode you did with Sadie Jones.
Yeah. So we talked about, sort of how employers generally think about the bar exam, deciding where you should take the exam, whether it's better to have a transferable UBE score or take it somewhere else. What if you have concerns about passing? And then, handling this unfortunate reality for a lot of people, which is, what do you do when you failed the bar and you have a job? There are lots of things that can arise out of that. I mean, a lot of the people we've been talking to in the last few weeks who found out they didn't pass the UBE are people who are working and studying. And so one of those conversations is, well, what kind of support are you getting from your employer? Are they giving you time off? Like, or what's going on here? And so, I don't think it's a situation anyone ideally obviously wants to find themselves in, but it is a situation many people do find themselves in. So this one has some tips on kind of handling that.
Yeah. And like most things, having a plan is going to help you deal with a difficult conversation. Nobody wants to have these conversations at work. Like, ugh, it's awful.
Right. But at the same time, I mean, you're probably not, unless it's a very, very, very small firm, you're probably not the very first person who's ever failed the bar. There probably is some sort of process in place. And oftentimes what I hear from people is that their employers are looking for them to come in with suggestions and a plan and things that would be helpful. And then the employer will do their best to accommodate that. So rather than just kind of throwing yourself at their mercy and saying, tell me what to do, I think it's obviously, usually better to go in and say, well, like, this is what I think I need to be able to get over this hurdle. And then together you can kind of figure out what's realistic.
And sometimes firms will pay to help you pass because it behooves them to get you a license because you're very expensive to not have a license. So, you want to make sure that you're understanding what the situation is because you might be worried that you can't afford to invest in help, but it's possible that the firm will pay for it or give you a stipend to pay for it, or there are lots of different ways that firms are handling it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think people just need to be realistic too about, what are the implications if they don't pass on the next try.
Right.
Things start to change a lot after you fail more than once, unfortunately.
True. Yeah. It seems like most firms you get 2 shots.
Right. And after that, you're probably not going to have a job anymore.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Number 8 on our list is episode 84, Tackling an MEE Partnership Essay. So these episodes, there are a lot of these episodes, these tackling episodes that you can look on our archives. But these were what came before the Listen and Learn episodes. So we would walk through a real exam question and kind of discuss the answer and how you would match facts to law. I think they are hugely helpful and a great listen, especially after doing some Listen and Learn episodes. And we even link to the essay question in the show notes. And so you can find the question, have it with you, and then sit down, work on it, outline it, and then do the episode where we walk through it. And I think that could be another way to kind of do some facilitated study. So that's another way to use kind of our tackling essay episodes, but there's a lot on there and I think they're worth checking out.
Yeah, we have them for UBE, which are shorter essays, in California, which are longer essays. I think these are great even for law students to work through.
Yeah, true.
If you have any friends who are still in law school, they're looking for support and help and kind of how to work through a problem. I think these are really great. So I think Listen and Learns are good too because they're more focused on a specific topic. But some of these, particularly in California, will cover multiple legal issues in a single essay. So, particularly like for foreign trained attorneys and things like that who are less familiar with kind of the U.S. way of doing things, I think these can be a really great resource.
Yeah. All right, Allison, what's number 9? We're getting close to the end of our top 10 list.
Well, this is 155, another really important topic on creating a study schedule. So this is another one that, people are worked up about, that we get a lot of questions about, particularly if people are coming back after not passing. So in this, we talked about choosing between using a commercial course study schedule and building your own, thinking about what materials and what tasks need to be on your study schedule. I mean, how many hours does bar prep even take? I mean, what do you have to do? What do you not need to do? We talked about how to structure your study time around your other responsibilities. One really important topic, prioritizing active learning over passive listening. I would add passive reading to that as well.
Yes.
And really focusing your efforts on bulking up your weaker areas. And so, I know a lot of people don't like to study the stuff that they're not great at, but the reality is that is where you can make up more points than doing the things you're already comfortable with.
Yes, it's so true. It's so true. And then I'm sure that we linked to our favorite blog post ever.
I'm sure.
Do the things that make you uncomfortable. Study the things that make you uncomfortable. Yeah.
Yeah. If there's one takeaway ever from us, that's probably it.
That's probably it. Yeah, exactly. All right. So I've got to admit that I cheated for number 10 on my top 10 list because I just picked my 10th.
It's fine.
I know.
We also already basically had the first 20 as our list.
So that's right. Okay.
So on the whole list.
Okay. Perfect. Excellent. Well, I really wanted to throw in a couple of episodes that I think are undervalued because they are back in the olden days of the beginning of the podcast, episodes 2 and 60. both are about talking about getting accommodations on the bar exam. And I think this is so important. I learned so much by doing these podcast episodes with experts on accommodations. And I think that both episodes have such great perspective on how to think about getting accommodations and how to go through the logistics of applying for them. And I think a lot of folks that we talk to often are just unsure about how to kind of wade into the accommodations process. It can sound so overwhelming. And then I think it can have complicated feelings behind it, especially if it's accommodations for something new that has arisen around the bar exam. I do know plenty of people who are dealing with new diagnoses around the bar exam, and that can make applying for accommodations be just a really personally challenging issue. But these episodes are for you if you are struggling. They are packed with good tips, tricks, language to use to talk about these issues. I love them. I hope more people go back and listen to them.
Yeah, and I think, obviously not getting accommodations that somebody needs is definitely one of the reasons people really struggle with the bar. And I think sometimes there's kind of a myopia about what accommodations are. It's only this one thing or this other thing, but it's actually a really wide universe, and people have all kinds of reasons that they may, need accommodations to compete on a level playing field. So if you think there's any possibility that this might be you or you're not quite sure, go ahead and give these a listen, because I agree with you. I think they're really important.
Yeah. I mean, some of the things that I think a lot of people don't consider is accommodations around breastfeeding. Mm-hmm. If you need to pump, you can get accommodations for pumping. There are all sorts of medical accommodations. So I know that I've had students who take medications that make it necessary for them to be closer to the restroom because they might need to go to the restroom more frequently. And so they get to take the exam in a private room that's like a hotel room with a restroom. I mean, that's a big deal. If you think that how much time you spend, if you're in the larger exam room, having to, go back and forth, or if you need to, a special keyboard, there are just so many different options. And I think a lot of times individuals just think that something is too small to ask for. But if it's going to be a big deal for you, you should get more information about how to apply for those accommodations. And please, please, please apply early so you can appeal them. So right. If they don't give them to you, you have time to appeal.
Yeah, and definitely, I think plan around all of this stuff and do it as early as possible, because what often happens, I think, is particularly if people are sitting for the first time, is they kind of look at this in May when they start studying, and then, California, I think has a 60-day turnaround best case scenario. Yeah. So at that point, you're already basically at the exam. So you need to be applying really early so that when you're studying what the situation you're dealing with is, if at all possible.
Yes, I have had a ton of students get accommodations letters within a week of the exam day.
Oh, yeah. And they tell you all this on the website. Mm-hmm. It should not be surprising.
Yeah. But I think everybody wants it to be faster, but they're just not very fast. None of these jurisdictions are particularly fast.
No, they're not fast at all. So you just really have to be, applying way, way, way in advance so that you, A, have a decision, and B, have time to appeal that decision. Yeah. Some states are notoriously bad at appeals, but in theory, you could appeal, or you could decide not to take the test or to take it someplace else if you really think that this is something that, has to happen.
Yep. But the best options you'll have is by doing it early. Basically, that is how you have the best options.
Go listen to those episodes right now and get your application together if you think you need to.
Exactly. Well, that's kind of it. That was our top 10 plus. I guess maybe I'll just do top 10 plus episodes from the first 200. I'm kind of excited to see what we'll come up with for the next 200. I feel like the listen and learns are going to be hard to beat. So I feel like a challenge has been mounted.
I know, but to be honest, when we started that, we were like, God, this is going to be so boring and no one is ever going to want to listen to this. So
that's true. But people love it. I know. We do have a new series that we are mixing in called Quick Tips that are very focused tips or things to try out as part of your bar prep. So if anyone has any suggestions for that content as well, you're welcome to drop us a line. And we always take episode suggestions.
We do. And thank you to everyone for listening. We do really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, with that, I think we're out of time. If you enjoyed this episode of the Bar Exam Toolbox podcast, please take a second to leave a review and rating on your favorite listening app. We'd really appreciate it, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Allison at lee@barexamtoolbox.com or allison@barexamtoolbox.com, or you can always contact us via our website contact form at barexamtoolbox.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk soon.